and welcome back to Last Week On. It's been a hot minute, but we are back with Invincible Season 2, Part 2, Jesus Christ, Episode 5. This must come as a shock, but before we jump into that, I have a very special guest who is joining me yet again. So, you already know this, but let's do it again. He is the host of SlayFS 98 podcast, as well as the co-host of My Bloody Judy podcast. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome back to the podcast Mr. ICC himself, Mr. Ian Carlos Crawford. How you doing, Ian?
Hello. Thank you for having me, Adam.
Of course, absolutely. And it's really nice as well jumping back into this because the last episode that I did was actually with Ian, and we looked at the Atom Eve episode, which was phenomenal. And there'll be a few little, things that we talk about in that, which obviously came back in this episode as well. But we've had some time off, Ian, since episode 4 to now. And this episode coming back, I mean, you and I were talking before, obviously this started, but I literally feel like as a episode to welcome you back, it literally punched you fully in the face with everything going on. Am I right?
Yeah. And even opens with Mark covered in blood, this poor guy,
Yep.
and ends with bloodshed as well, because that's the show we're watching.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know what it is? It always reminds you, it always finds a way to remind you, oh, this is the show that you're watching. So it does that weird thing where, and I think other shows like Game of Thrones used to do this a little bit sometimes, where just where you start to get comfortable, it reminds you, oh, by the way, this is the type of show that we are.
Yeah.
So people can be axed at any second. So just remember that. And boy, oh boy, shit the bed, do we get that in this episode? What? But yeah, there's so much that happens. So let's just dive in and let's start. All right. So as Ian said there, we open with the aftermath, literally where episode 4 ended, where Mark's left on the Thraxan planet, and basically the Viltrumites that took his dad away, they've gone now, the planet they've completely destroyed, basically. And then we've got the Thraxans that are just walking around, and it's just battered and bruised the whole planet, right? And then this it just reminds you again of how ruthless the Viltrumites actually are. So I know we saw that in Nolan, obviously at the end of season 1 massively, but when we see, it's not just Nolan, right? He isn't just the vision of the Viltrumites that we get. When we see the Viltrumites come down at in part 1 of season 2, Jesus Christ, when we saw them come down and all that destruction, you are reminded constantly, this is a race who are ready to kill, who are ready to fuck things up. And if you don't agree with them, we'll just wipe you out.
Yeah. And to this episode, when I was watching it today, I was like, God, sometimes this does border on horror, because it's just you're always oh, this person's gonna die. Ugh. I know Mark is safe, but no, because he's the main character, but no one else I feel is.
No.
And I'm just always worried that any one of them, when they're in danger, are going to die.
Yep.
And I think I texted you this too. When I was done, I was just oh, so tense.
You know what? Yeah, absolutely. And
the Viltrumites are the big bad, right? They're the ones that can kill anyone.
Mm-hmm. Yep. They're always and I kind of when I was making notes about season 2 overall, one of the points I was going to bring up with you, because it's a very Buffy thing, is that sometimes Buffy does this thing where it introduces a big bad and then they go away in the background for a little bit, but there's still a looming threat. So particular season 5, right? Glory wasn't in every single episode, but you always knew she was planning, scheming, and she was there in the background and could show up at any moment. And it reminds me so much of this, where the Viltrumites, they come down, they destroy everything, fuck shit up, and they're remember, we will absolutely destroy you unless you do what we want you to do. And then they just take off, and they're going back to do whatever they do. And I love that. For me, that's kind of a strength of the show as well. Because there is so much going on, there's so many cogs moving, but always remember, you've got this big thing, this big enemy, so to speak, in the background that will turn up at any point and they will wipe you out. And oh boy, do we see that a lot in this show. But then, so obviously, as we say, Mark's covered in blood, beaten to shit, obviously, after his big fight with the lady with the whip hair. Do you remember her? When she was tossing her hair.
I couldn't remember. Does he kill her? I can't remember if he does.
I think, I'm trying. I think he badly wounds her. I think
I just couldn't remember if he killed the person he was fighting, or if she was one of the people that takes Nolan away.
I think he badly wounds her, because he does get a good few licks into her. I think he stabs her with her own hair as well. But remember the guy as well who had he was holding his guts together, he came back from the fight. You remember?
True.
So she's probably there swinging two lasso hair around. But then anyway, we get Andressa, who was Nolan's new wife or girlfriend or whatever. She comes over the Thraxan and she basically says, oh, look, Nolan's gone now. She thanks Mark obviously for saving them, but he's like, oh my God, like, what are we gonna do? And she's like, look, we will rebuild, right? We always come back, we will rebuild. Like, that is what we do. But then she drops the bombshell where she's like, look, Mark, like, our time, and this was addressed in like the last kind of part of the season, like, sorry, the first part of the season, our time isn't as long as human life. So basically, I am getting older and I've got a favor to ask you, and I need you to take the baby. Now, this is the baby that she had with Nolan, and I want your thoughts, Ian, on this baby. What do you think of this Thraxan Viltrumite baby?
So I will say I liked that the mom was so nice. I did like that
Yes.
she was like very like sweet with Mark and thanked him and was like, if your father hadn't come here, I wouldn't have had this child. And if you weren't here, the child wouldn't have lived.
Mm.
I feel like Nolan has a type, which is weird because he's so awful, but he like is attracted to these like very tender, like sweet women, right? It's like they're not evil like him. Um, and I did really like that, but I also like, I don't know, that's a lot to put on someone, especially
Mm-hmm.
like he is maybe 19 at this point, and it's like, I don't know. I would have taken the baby as well because I would have felt bad, but I think I also would have been like, here, Cecil, take the baby. Like, here you
Yeah.
go. I found this.
Mm-hmm. You know what? Like, for me personally, I think Mark was fully within his rights to say, fuck off. Like, I'm not taking that baby.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, this has got nothing to do with me. I've got my own life going on back on planet Earth. I've got my mother who I care about, my actual mother. And I know you're being lovely, and I know you're playing the card, the sympathy card of remember this is your brother. And she kept calling him like his
Yeah.
brother. But at the same time, that's a lot. But as you said, he does have that option. He doesn't know it at the time, but obviously he does have that option later on. Like, he can just give him to Cecil and say, look, you deal with him because he is an alien after all, of like mixed race of like two different types of aliens, right?
Yeah.
But that is a lot. And it is, and they do emphasize this point, which says I love, is that, and Debbie says it later on, look, Nolan is the king of like basically dropping his shit on other people, disappearing, expecting them to pick up after him. And that's exactly what is happening with this baby, and like
Yep.
he knew that he would outlive like his wife. Yeah, he would have to raise that child. Obviously, Nolan's not here now. Mark is the next logical step, question mark. But as you said, Ian, he's 19. It's a lot to take on.
Right. Like I mean, I guess in his brain he was thinking, oh, me and my mom can do it together.
Mm,
But I mean, we'll get to Debbie when we get to her. Don't want
yeah.
to jump.
No, 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 no. Of course, that is a question that is a conversation you need to have with your mother before you even bring the baby. To be fair, but I guess he didn't have that choice.
Yeah.
I do love that. Obviously, they're having that conversation when Mark wants to stay and rebuild the Thraxian world and help them out. He's dressed as like this Greek Adonis because okay. And
Sure.
then
Yeah.
yeah, okay, fine. And then yeah, like I love when that old man Thraxan comes over. He's like, the ship is ready to take you back, and he's like, you know what? I don't want to go back. Like the Earth will be fine. And I love this line. This is for me, like, this is my humor. It's so dumb and it's so stupid, but I love it. When he's like, oh, like the people on Earth will be fine. They've got heroes that can look after them. And then like we see Immortal and like the Guardians of the Globe, like all the heroes, and there's this big Skeletor type creature. Like that's basically what he is. And he's like, tremble before my ultimate power. And like he's just like, no. It just cuts back to Mark. Like, very, very good.
I want you to know I described him in my notes as a giant Skeletor on steroids.
There you go. It's literally him, right? Like a skeleton in
Yeah.
a hood, literally Skeletor. I love as well, like, normally we get the Invincible logo, like it pops up when something, dramatics happen, or like we don't know when it's going to pop up. It's something
Yeah.
mundane, but this is the softest version of it I think we've ever had. So,
I was
like,
wondering that too. I was like, have we ever gotten like a normal where it's not like blood or explosions?
no, I mean, like, obviously, like the theme of this one is like invincible signs starting to crack, and we get that quite a lot where like pieces are starting to fall out of the sign. But
Yeah.
we've never had it where it's just like this nice, gentle kind of, and she's like, if your father lives, he'll go searching for you, not me. Like she, like Andressa says, I get that. I totally understand that. I'm going to die. You're still going to be around. This is why I want you to look after our son. And then suddenly it's just like this nice gentle music, and it's just the logo comes up. I've never
Yeah.
had that before, but that was interesting. Then we go to Debbie coming back from work. I wanted Debbie to invite Paul in. I'm sorry, but I did. Like, she deserves something.
She
So like,
does.
he really does. And like this nice guy from work called Paul, like chases her out the car, gives her this bottle of wine, gives her a hug. I was like, invite him in, Debbie. Go on, like have a coffee, like open that wine, like have a glass together because you deserve some happiness.
I was hoping it was going to be like, just because it's like a jump or whatever. I was hoping to be like, oh yeah, that's her boyfriend now, is what I was hoping we
Mm.
were gonna get. Cause like you said, she fucking deserves to get like a break.
Yes, absolutely. Like Jesus. And she deserves a break, like on her own terms. What she doesn't deserve is to have a baby dumped on her and be told, yeah, you've got to look after this, which is what we
Yeah.
get. So then obviously Debbie goes in, Mark turns up. She's like, oh my God, I haven't seen you in 2 months. I gives him a big hug. And he's like, oh yeah, by the way, I've got this purple baby, like a baby Thanos, basically. And then he's like, Mark's trying to, because he's 19, right? So like he's trying to rationalize everything in his mind. He still loves his dad. He's obviously been influenced by Andressa as well. And he says, like, look, well, dad didn't really have a choice. And I love that Debbie says he didn't have to go to a new planet, find a new partner, and have a baby. He had choices, and that's what he chose to do.
Adam, I was so glad Debbie said that because I was like, you know how I feel about Nolan. I fucking hate him.
Yeah.
I hate him. I hate him. I hate him. And like, I don't think there's ever going to be any kind of like redemption arc that I will be like, okay, I like him. Like, I think I will always hate him for he like basically committed genocide, beat the shit out of his son, and called his wife a pet. Like, there's just, I know in comic books and even like Buffy and shit like that, it's like, yeah, the person murdered, but now they're a good guy. But like,
Mm,
I just don't think I can ever get on board with Nolan again. And
mm,
Mark was being too, and I get it, it's his dad, but like, I don't know. I don't think I would ever, for like, if that were
mm,
my dad, I don't know that I would be like, well, I would be like, no, fuck you. Like, there would be
mhm,
no point when I wasn't like, fuck you. And I felt Mark was being a little too, like, a little too like tender with about his dad and his dad's things because and I was so glad Debbie said it because I was like, is Debbie gonna be nice about Nolan too? Because
mhm.
like she just shouldn't be. And then she wasn't. I was really glad she said that because even though this kind of wasn't the same thing because he was captured, it still is like what he does, right?
Absolutely that 100%. Like, the whole time, like when I was watching, I was putting myself in Mark's shoes and I'd be like, how would I deal with that? And like my star sign is Cancer. We're very emotional. So I would be like, the cancer in me would jump out of my mouth. I'd be like, absolutely no way. You can go fuck yourself. Like, no, like putting my foot down right there. And as you say, like, I love that we get the reality check from Debbie when she's like, dial it back a little bit, Mark. Let's just remind you of what your father's done. As you say, he shits on everyone and then just leaves you to clean up. And then he just flies off to another planet, finds another partner, and has a baby. Like, he's not going to come back and talk to me. Like, his wife for how long? We have a
Right.
son together. You, like, he's not going to deal with any of that. He's just going to fly off and forget it ever happened. So, yeah, like, don't get me wrong. In, like, a lot of the comics that I've read, I haven't read it all, but Nolan, obviously, and I guess you know this, Ian, like he's going to go on some type of redemption arc, right? We saw that at the
Right.
end of season one as well, like, the tears in his eyes. We saw it here as well. We get the message as well that he gave to Mark as well, like at the end of the last episode, which we'll come back to. Um, Nolan obviously does go on a redemption arc, but oh boy, he's got to do a lot to like get back in people's good graces because Jesus Christ, as you said, there's like genocide and then there's like flipping someone off. Like, there is
Yeah.
massive scale of things that you've got to do to get back on people's side, right? Mark agrees with it, right? He says, like, you're right about dad leaving his problems for like other people to fix. And then Debbie, because she's an absolute saint, says, like, look, don't take that time off school, Mark. Like this baby, like you shouldn't have to give away your school life. I will figure something out. I will look after him. Just please don't quit school. And that's the mother in Debbie.
Yeah.
That is the tenderness in her where she wants the best for her actual son. But then I think by this point, she probably sees like this is an extension of Mark. This is a problem that I can help him with. So he shouldn't have to shoulder this himself. We had that beautiful moment in like part one of season two. Jesus. When like, Debbie let Mark go because she said, look, I understand you've got to go to college, you've got to go and live your own life. And she
Yeah.
knows that this will break that. Like, this will break that point in Mark where, like, no longer can he go and, like, start living his own life, like, have some taste of just being human, having a teenage life. That will go if he takes this responsibility on solo. So, Debbie, being the incredible mother that she is, steps up and goes, actually, Mark, no, keep living your life, go to school, get your grades back, everything. I will help you with this. That's why I love Debbie.
Well, and I think you and I both are a little bit more partial to her because, like, I was, excuse me, I was very close with my mom and you're very close with your mom.
Yeah.
So it's like, I feel like that's why we gravitate towards Debbie, but also why we are so mad at Nolan, right?
Yeah. And I think I've always said about Debbie as well, like we see ourselves in the show through Debbie. Like she is the humanity of the show. And she
Yeah,
allows us to like see ourselves within the show as well, absolutely. Because we can't, Mark's a superhero, right? Like
right.
Nolan's a superhero, Adam Eve's a superhero, but we can see ourselves in the show through Debbie's eyes, like through her pain, through her happiness, through all of that. So then we cut to Cecil and Donald, because remember, Donald started questioning his own existence in the
I
first
had
half.
fully forgotten about that plot.
Yeah, same, big same. So when I saw him again, I was like, oh yeah, you remember that because he watched the video of himself dying, right? And he was like,
Yeah.
oh. Now I love like because Donald is such like he is Cecil's pet essentially. He's like the second in command. He like does whatever he says. But then I love when he goes full on using his top voice and he's like, "Everybody leave the room! Like give me
Yeah.
the room!" And it's like, okay, Donald, come through. Um, and I love when characters do this when they just cut through the bullshit and then you're like, okay, Cecil, what the fuck is going on? And Cecil's like, okay, well, let me take you to this white room, and there's parts of it that you never actually got to see. And then, he's at first he's trying to talk him down. He's like, Cecil, no, what the fuck is going on? And then shows him his Terminator exoskeleton lying on a slab and says, oh, well, when you died, we rescued your brain, we put it in here. Like, what's your thoughts on this, Ian?
Cecil was like kind of a dick about it. He was just like, yeah, that's what
Yep.
happened, whatever. And it's like, okay, but that is a big reveal to drop on someone that like, oh, no big deal. You're a robot. Like, and here's your other skeleton that we have as a backup. Um,
Hmm.
but I was glad we kind of like got to the point of that because I felt like, it's fine, but I don't think as an audience we care enough about Donald for that to have been like a whole season long story. Like I
Yeah.
needed to get something from that because we also already were like, okay, he's a clone or something. Like we
Hmm.
already got there because we saw him like open up his arm. And so
Right.
I did need us to like solve that mystery because I didn't care enough for that to be like a lingering mystery.
And I don't think it will. Like, it's just
Yeah, yeah.
it's very much like, C plot of to be
Yeah.
fair, like probably D or E plot with everything going on in this episode alone. Jesus. But
Jesus, yeah.
yeah, I'm the same. Like I'm pleased that we got to that. Like it wasn't, as you said, like this overarching mystery that was dragged out. And I've always said this about the show, and I'll say it again, like the writing is always like so good. And I love that that was a decision that was made. Like, look, we're not going to drag
Yeah.
this thing out. Let's get to the point. This is what he is. He now knows what he is. Now he has to deal with that. Almost like literally everyone in this show has some type of existential crisis, and even a minor character like Donald is also having that now
Yeah.
with finding out his brain is inside of an exoskeleton. Like Jesus. Then we go back to everyone's favorite William, like Mark's
I was
gay
very
best
happy to
friend.
see him.
Same. And I love that we just cut to the dorm room. He's chilling out. He's just like literally reading. And then Mark comes in like full Invincible uniform and he's like, oh my God, like I haven't seen you in ages. And like I love this. And we've always said this scene about the show. I love when the friends just catch up, right? It is literally like the Scoobies and Buffy, like the moments when
Yeah.
they would just sit and just catch up and hang out. And Mark's like, explains everything to him. He's like, look, this is what happened. And like, William's like, well, I covered it for you as long as I could, but you've got to go and see the dean because like, all this paperwork you've missed out on. Like, I couldn't cover you for you for 3 months, so you're gonna have to go and sort it out. But I
And
just
that
love their friendship.
Yeah, and I do like when Mark is like, "When'd you start locking the window?" And he's like, "After the giant bug dressed like a dog." Like that's such a silly line, but it works because that's what
Yeah.
fucking happened. I didn't even remember the dog aspect, but I was like, I mean, yeah, especially
Yeah, yeah.
without Mark there to like save him if something happens, I would also lock everything.
Yeah, because it was the Thraxon, right, posing as the dog to come and get Mark to bring him to the planet to help. It was just
Right, right.
it was a whole thing, right? And it was a lot. But yeah, it was like, and as you say, it's such a stupid, silly line. But like when you reference back to everything that's happened so far in 2 seasons, and like, well, 2 seasons and sorry, 1.5 seasons,
Yeah.
like so much. And so that line stands up. It just shows you how far we're gonna go with this show and more.
So because I am me, when when Mark took his shirt off and like William was in the background, I was like, it's gonna get sexy. What's going? Oh, right, right, right. They're best friends. I look at way too many things online, and I was like, my brain went to, did I miss something? And I was like, oh, no, right, they are best friends. They can get changed in front of each other. That is fine.
Hmm.
But I just wanted to throw that in there. That's where my fucking pervert brain went.
To be fair, I love it. When I was watching that scene, I was like, Martin got changed in front of me. But yeah, I mean, I was the same. I was like, to be fair, like, obviously they have that friendship. They've known each other like since they were little, like, it's whatever. But yeah, I kind of when I watched, I was like, like, especially like
Right.
coming through the window, taking off the clothing,
And the
like it
way
was
it's
so
shot, it's
beautiful.
like his torso and like
Yeah. He's like, is he going to get naked in front of William?
Yeah.
Are we going there? Is that door going to lock properly now? Like, what are we doing here? And give me an episode of that. Ooh,
I'm
give
like,
me a
I have
stand.
read this. I have read this fanfic.
No, no, Ian, you have written that fanfic.
I have
Let's be
written
real.
that.
um, yeah, give me a standalone episode of that, please. Be well up for that. Yeah, so then obviously Cecil turns up and ruins the mood. Cockblocks William, and then says, yeah, basically, you should have checked in. Remember that you said that, if I put you back in the field, you would take my orders. We then quickly cut back to a moment when the Guardians again are fighting Skeletor, and then Ship Smith obviously is the Martian who looks like the guy who I absolutely love, by the way. I love this character. I loved, like, in the earlier seasons when he kept trying to pose as humans, and like there was that one scene when he was just like running on the treadmill, but like just on the spot, like just running like that because he thought like that's what you had to do, and like just try to pose as a human. But obviously, he gets knocked back by Skeletor, and then Samson looks over and sees him, and he sees him morph back into his Martian form before then going back, and he's like, Then we cut back to Cecil basically explains that things actually haven't been fine on Earth, that there's been a lot
Right.
going on. This is the conversation. Like, Cecil is always 2 steps ahead of everything going on. So then Mark starts to explain things, and he knows just the way Cecil's looking at him. He's like, you already know. You already know about this baby. Like, how? Have you got cameras set up in the house? Are you keeping an eye on, like, what is going on? He says, look, we keep tabs because we have to. And to be fair, like, when Nolan was there, they already had this in place. I totally get it. Like,
Yeah.
he is the most powerful man on the world. He could destroy the world. We saw what happened. Of course, he should keep tabs on Nolan. By default, obviously, because Debbie's a part of that, he obviously sees that as well. So he's like, look, we know about the baby. I know about the baby. Of course I do. I'm fucking Cecil. Like, do you think anything comes on this planet without me knowing?
Right.
And he says, look, we'll send a team to pick him up. Like, you are not equipped to look after this alien baby. We will send a team. We'll look after him. He's like, Mark is pissed. He's like, no. Oh, no, 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 no. This is my thing. This is kind of by extension, the last part of my father who told me to, this one little message before he left. God knows if he's still alive. You're not taking this away from me.
So I'm curious what you think about that, because for me, there is like a little bit of a gray area where I understand why Mark is like, no, but also they are not equipped to raise an alien baby because it's not just Viltrumite, it's the Thraxans as well. So who knows, like, what, even if the baby's like not evil, it's still going to have like, it could have, some weird powers that they don't know about. So I'm like, I land in the middle of like, I understand Mark, but I also kind of think they should just give the baby to Cecil because they don't know. And like, I would be worried if something would happen to Debbie if I were Mark,
Yes. Yeah. It's twofold for me. So I think if that was me, I'd be like, Cecil, take this fucking baby. Like, take it.
Yeah.
You are more equipped than Debbie and I to deal with this. Take it. But, and this is the only thing that makes me say but, that could have been Mark, right? So like Mark could have been taken by Cecil as well. And we know that Cecil probably would have turned him into a weapon. That's what Cecil's wanted to do this whole time. So
Yeah.
that's in the back of Mark's mind, where Mark was raised by Debbie. The reason why Mark has so much humanity in him and isn't just a soldier of Viltrum, like isn't just a Viltrum soldier, is because he
Right.
was raised by his mother. If he was just raised by his father, this would have been a different Mark. And like he would have still been with Nolan, they would have conquered the earth, it would have been very different. So I guess he knows in a way that Debbie is a great caretaker, obviously what she did with him. She will be one of the best people to look after this baby, to imbue into him what she imbued into Mark. So I guess there's that angle that Eam could be considering as well. But if this was me, I'd be like, Cecil, take this fucking baby. Like, honestly, take that away from me. I have got way too much going on with like everything else. And now a baby. And like, I'm not dropping that on my mother. Like, no.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. But that's maybe the angle that Mark's coming from there.
No,
Where he
yeah,
doesn't
no, I
want
agree.
to become a weapon. So maybe, but I guess we'll see more of that as it goes on. I do love that. This line from Cecil when Mark says like, "Oh, I'll check in tomorrow," and like he's like, "Okay, I'll call off the guys that are going to go over and take over the baby," and he says, "Fine, I'm sure your mom will love looking after her ex-husband's kid." Like just a stab in the gut, right?
And I mean, but also he's not wrong.
He's not wrong. He's not
Right?
wrong. No. It's just it's a very blunt, straightforward way of saying it,
Yeah.
right? Like, and that is Cecil through and through. Like, look, I'm going to tell you the truth and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And that's the way it is.
And I think Cecil does like Debbie. Like, I think he does
Oh,
care
yeah.
about her, right? Like,
Mhm.
and I do think you're right. Like, he could inevitably turn the baby into a weapon, but even if he has those motives, I do think there is like a part of him that does care about this family and doesn't want anything bad happening to Debbie. So that is another reason. Like maybe there is the ulterior motive of like raising the baby to be a weapon and work for the team, but I also think there is a little bit of like caring there.
You know what? And it's not caring for Mark, it's caring for Debbie. So, like,
Yeah.
the fact that he said that line, like, it's about Debbie. You know, he's like not saying it about like Mark or even the child. He says, I'm sure your mom will love looking after her
Yeah.
ex-husband's kid, aka your mother has been through a fucking lot, Mark, because he cares about Debbie. And these are
Mhm.
like the seeds that are starting to being sown with the way that develops between Debbie and Caesar. Like, they go on a really interesting journey together. But this is just like the crumbs of what we start to get with that now, which is really interesting. So, like, when we cover this later on, Ian, like in the future, and we'll come back to this episode and be like, remember that? But yeah, a lot happens. Okay. Then Mark goes to see Amber, Ian, and I I love Amber, this Amber. She has been so understanding, like so understanding. But you know what? Like, I love that they hug. Like, she's really happy to see him. Like, you know, she could be like, fucking hell, Mark. Like, I haven't seen you in 3 months. She gives him a big hug. And like all of this, when he apologizes and he's like, oh my God, I've told you all of this stuff. Please tell me what's been going on with you. And she's like, well, you know, I failed an exam and like my grandpa died. And he's like, oh my God, I missed all of this. And these two lines I wrote down because I even wrote under this, like, I love this Amber when she's like, look, I knew the deal when I signed on.
I
I
wrote
knew
that
what I
down
was
too.
walking into. Yeah. And you know, it juxtaposes season one, Amber, who was like, she was giving Mark shit. She was like, I know you're a superhero, but I'm not going to tell you that until you try and tell me, and then I'll use that on
Yeah.
you. This is like an evolution of that now, where Amber's like, you know what? I knew what I was signed on to. It's totally fine. And then this line, your father can't change how I feel about you, no matter how many planets he destroys. Because Mark is so worried that she and other people will view Mark through the eyes of what his father has done, right? Like, he is an extension of Nolan.
Yeah.
He is a Viltrumite, part Viltrumite. You know, everything that Nolan's done, Mark could also do. And like, it's one of those things where, like, you know, when something's happened to you by extension, your parents or whatever, and people look at you and they know about it, they give you that look. And Mark
Yeah.
had that in school, right? When he went back to school, everyone was looking at him, like giving him that look. And I love that line because Mark now understands like this relationship and how adult it is, right? Like, she is looking at him for him. She doesn't care about any of that other shit. That is love right there. And I
Yeah.
absolutely love this version of Amber.
And also that like it I mean the show does a good job of this in general, but it like flips that trope, right? The trope would normally be in the superhero story that like,
Yeah.
oh, the girlfriend's annoyed because he didn't make dinner or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I like because also I feel like she would have every reason to just, even if she's understanding, be like, I'm still hurt that you weren't able to be there at my grandpa's funeral. Like,
Mm.
she would have every right to just like maybe not feel great about that.
Yeah.
But even that, she's like, I understand. Like, I know.
Mm.
So I really like what they do with the like civilian human characters in
Yes.
this. Um, because they're also pretty dynamic, even though they don't need to be, especially like superhero stories don't put that much work into sometimes the like non-superhero characters.
No, I 100% agree. Like, every time this show, like, you know, the word is humanity every time. And every time we return to that, it's done so well and so organic, where it's like, it doesn't feel forced. There's a lot of
Yeah.
shows that I've been watching recently, one in particular, which does a lot of like tell, don't show. This show does the absolute opposite every single time, where, like, you know, all of the subtext and everything, you see it all building together so beautifully. I think as well, like with this, Amber has obviously lost her grandpa. He obviously meant a lot to her. And with her knowing that, like, you know, losing somebody so important in her life, you know, it puts a lot into perspective. So Mark hasn't died. Mark has gone away. So Mark comes back. Obviously, she doesn't have that option with her grandpa. And I think it does put a lot of those kind of relationships that you have with people, with your friends, and obviously the family as well that
Yeah.
you have, like, into perspective, right?
Yeah. No, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. So then, yep, obviously they hug, they get back on good terms, and then we get a quick flash of Donald, who's having a dream that he's being strangled by his Terminator exoskeleton. And then a woman comes in, is like, oh, there's something in the room, come up on the scanner, please come with me. Okay, whatever. We then so we see the Guardians of the Globe here again. So we see them all training, right? So we see Monster Girl, we see Duplicate fighting each other, Immortals, like, you know, doing the Buffy season 5 Giles thing with the blindfold on. You must listen and like hear where like you're, you know, where the enemies are, which obviously we get that straight away. Ruddy, who remember is now Robot, who is like the human version of Robot, because of course he tells Immortal that, Monster Girl ages in reverse. So you got to be careful when she transforms and blah, 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 blah. And I love that Monster Girl is like, hold on a second, like back the fuck off. Like we've had one
Yeah.
date. We are not together. So like, stop being so controlling. Like, what are you doing? That is my place to say something. This is me. This is my process. If I feel bad about that, I will say something. I don't need you jumping in to say something about me, especially when I'm in the room.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I will say that it reminded me that I was like, I think I assumed that it was supposed to be more time has passed. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
not that much time has passed. And I get why he's trying to be protective, but also, yeah, she's like an adult and can speak for herself.
I love as well that Rex is like just taunting him a bit. And like Rex is like, I remember season one Rex, I was like, can't stand him, not a fan at all. This for me is the redemption arc of where Rex, because Rex is like where I'm reading up to now in the comics. Rex is one of my favorite characters. And the way, like, this is the
Oh, you're
start of
still
like
reading it right now?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
This is because like the three like versions are like that, Ian. They're like huge. So if you put them together, they're like that. But yeah, like Rex for me, this is the side of Rex that I love, right? And it's like he's starting to redeem himself a lot more and realize that like he knows he's a dickhead, and he's like, look, I've got to
Yeah.
focus on bigger things right now. But I love this when Cecil turns up and he's like, motherfucker, like just completely shocked out of his own skin. So
Also,
then
that voice actor is just so good at being shitty. When he's like, "Oh, his eighth grade prom canceled," is such a good shitty line.
he like serves every single time. He turns up and gives 150% in that recording booth every single time. He's
Yeah.
so good. Cecil obviously turns up. He tells him there's a ship coming from Mars. Samson then tries to dox Shapesmith. And like, I love that, like, Shapesmith's starting to say, he's like, look, guys, I've had a secret I haven't told you for so long. I probably should have. And like, Cecil's just like, yeah, you're a Martian. Like, we all know. Like, get to the point. And I love that. And like, Samson's like, you all knew?
Yeah, and it
Absolutely.
also makes sense, right? It makes sense that he would know because we know he's like always has surveillance everywhere.
Yeah, like that's what we said earlier. Like Cecil knows when literally like a speck of dust, alien dust, comes from outside and lands on
Yeah.
the earth. Cecil knows, so of course he's gonna know. But he says, like the reason why we kept you around is like we wanted to know why, and like obviously we'll find out. And then he says, look, this spaceship is coming from Mars. I need to ask you, tell me everything. Go. And then we get like the Shapesmith kind of origin stories. Look, I was born on Mars. Like we're all Martians. We had the Sequids as servants. Okay. He's like, because they can't penetrate our skin, so we just use them. And he's like, I hated living underground. I wanted to explore, which obviously we get a lot of because here he is on a different planet. And then he's like, then like when you guys landed on here in season one, he's like, I knocked out that astronaut and then I took over his form. And like, I love straight away when like the camera turns to all of them, they're all just staring at them, like, and what happened to the astronaut? And he's like, well, the Sequid took him. And all of this. What do you think of Shapesmith, Ian?
Um, I like him. I had forgotten all about him. And I was
Hmm.
like, all right, the alien. I appreciate that we didn't just breeze by because I was like, wait a minute, did he fucking kill that astronaut? And then I
Hmm.
like you said, everyone's like, wait a minute, what happened to the astronaut? And he's like, man. I appreciate the show does that a lot where it's like it doesn't breeze by something that like they
Hmm.
could maybe breeze by. Like, you could have just been like, okay, whatever.
Hmm.
But I don't know. I like that. And I like him. Is he not voiced by what's his face from Parks and Rec? Because I thought he was, but I didn't see his name when I paused it on Amazon.
Oh, it's Ben Schwartz.
Oh, it is him. Okay, it is
Yeah,
him.
yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. There you go. Yeah, so you were correct, Ian. You know a voice when you hear it. But yeah, he's great. And I love how like teenager he is about it all. When like he's like, oh yeah, like the Sequid, they took him, and now he's the host of like basically this hive. Like, haha. And he's like, I'm so sorry. Like,
Yeah.
I just love how he's like, he doesn't know how to engage in an adult like conversation because one, it's like, a conversation between humans. He's still learning all of this, and he's still quite young at heart. So he's like, I'm sorry, that's what happened. Like, I should have
Oh, and
told
they're
you
like,
earlier.
it's all your fault. And he's like, yeah, you get it now. Like,
And obviously they accost him for it, like for lying. Cecil says, like, look, we will use you for now as intel, but we will come back to this. And rightfully so, right? Because he's fucked up a lot.
yeah.
So then Immortal like jumps into leader mode and he's like, look, okay, like you guys like will come with me, you guys stay here. Robot argues against that. And he's like, no, actually, like I've got this suit, I should go with you because I can do these things. Cecil's like, yep, I agree. And then Rex says, actually, I've got a plan. And I love when
Yeah.
we follow up with that later on. Then we go to Adam Eve, one of my absolute favorites. Like, I love this girl. And I have to say, Ian, I've even got it here. Like, After watching her solo episode when you and I covered it, every little moment of this, like when she's sitting with her parents, when she goes upstairs, she's talking to Rex, when she pulls the photograph out of the drawer, because we watched that episode and we didn't have to, it was totally optional. You don't have to. You get so much more out of those moments now. So
Yeah.
like everything. And I love that the way they do this when they've just got the music playing in the background. She's not even speaking to her parents because they're still kind of like at odds with each other. Like she wants to be a superhero. They were really shitty with her when she lost those people, on two occasions when she thought like the people
Right.
drowned in the river as well. And her dad was just like, well, told you so, and like they're just not even speaking. She like watches them. They're just getting on with their lives. And obviously Rex comes and visits them as well, her as well, and I absolutely love this part of Rex. Like this for me is the Rex that I love. When she's
Yeah.
like, he's like basically talk to me like what's going on. He's like, I knew something shitty must be going on for you to come back here, the place that you hate. And she's like, well, this happened in Chicago, and then like that fight with Kilcannon when I knocked the car over and the people fell into the river and like all of this. And he's like, look, everyone fucks up. Like to fuck up is human. He's like, Shakespeare said that once.
Yeah.
And I love he says the line, having powers isn't easy, but we do our best. Like even assholes like me.
Yeah.
I love this Rex. That is exactly what she needed to hear. It wasn't about him going on an ego trip. That's what she needed to hear.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I love
I
it.
wrote down the to fuck up is human. Shakespeare said that because I really love that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a completely correct line, like undercut with the joke, and it's just perfect. It just works
Yeah.
so damn well. And he's trying to be a good friend to her because they have history. He obviously knows he was an arsehole to her, he, like cheated on her, everything like that. Like he knows he's fucked up with her massively and he's been a dick. He's
Yeah.
really got to win her back over because he knows like she is one of the most powerful of all of them. They need her. And Rex was the perfect person to send over there. And to get this insight into Rex is so good. Like an arsehole character coming out with these pearls of wisdom. I absolutely love it. And as I say, like when she pulls the photo out of the drawer, and like, you and I, Ian, we saw those characters in that episode. We know how much they mean to her. Whereas watching this without that, okay, like that was her previous family, like that was her real mother, like we saw that. But when you watch it entire to that episode, my God, it hangs on you a lot more, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
She sees through and she's like, okay, thank you so much, Rex. That's lovely. But why are you here? And he's like, all right, okay, yeah, actually, I need your help with this. So he kind of comes clean to her. And then we cut back to Debbie. So Debbie's with a purple baby. She's obviously trying to give him baby food. He's spitting it all out because he's a baby. And like, this is the line I was talking about before. So if you remember, like, we go back to episode 4 before we had this huge break. When Nolan was being taken away on the stretcher by the Viltrumites, he specifically said to Mark this line: "Don't forget the good I did. Read my books, Mark. Read my books, Mark."
I
He
forgot about
said
that.
he said that line specifically. So when Mark comes back, he picks up the baby. He's happy to see him again. But then he says, where's Dad's stuff? Like, have you still got it? And Debbie's like, well, I gave a lot of it away. I threw it out. And he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, I need to see some of this stuff because Dad told me this thing. I've got to read some of his books. And I always forget, like, Nolan even wrote books. Like, I always forget that. But, he says, like, I need to check them out because my father, like, he said this line to me. Hang on to that line, Ian, because it's very, very important. That's all I'll say. It'll come back. But yeah, I love that they don't make a big deal of it. It's one small scene. It's mentioned here, but it'll come back in a big way. Then
I mean,
obviously,
I did get annoyed at him because I was like, "What are you mad at her for? Of course she threw away his shit. You were gone for 2 months." Like,
yeah, exactly. Like she doesn't need that. Why do I need a reminder of my husband who like did all of this shit? Like I don't need any of this crap. And like the books that
yeah,
he wrote, I'm gonna keep them around. So of course, like she's gonna get rid of that shit. But yeah, hang on to that line. That will come back. Then Cecil shows up, and basically, what does he say, Ian?
he needs Mark to go up to space again,
Mm.
again, again.
And obviously, he like sees the baby and he says to Debbie, look, like, if you do need their assistance, and Mark's like, we'll be fine. Obviously, Mark then gets ready, and then Caesar like does have that one look at Debbie and says, like, look, if you do need it though, like, you let me know.
Yeah,
And I do like it's like going back to what we said, like I do really like that about Cecil where he's looking out for her, and he's basically saying, like, I could take that on, I could take that responsibility out of your hands because you have been through a lot.
and she has.
Too
give
much.
give Debbie a break.
Exactly. Mark obviously calls Amber, tells her about the trip to Mars. Obviously, she's not best pleased, but she gets it. She's like, look, I get it. Calls some friends. She's like, look, I happen to be free tonight. Do you want to hang out? Fair enough. Like, you go and do you, girl. Like,
Yeah.
absolutely. Like, don't be alone. Like, obviously, you've waited so long for Mark already. You've had your time for him. Go and spend time with friends.
You know what I
Um,
keep waiting for? I kept waiting for them to like maybe like there be like a handsome straight guy that they're alluding to, maybe that
yeah,
like he could take Mark's place or something.
that's what
Because
I thought.
even though she's so understanding, I would get it, right? Like
Hmm.
it's not even
Yeah.
like they're texting when he's gone. It's like zero communication.
And 3 months, like a long time. Like we're not just
Yeah.
talking like 2 weeks, like 3 months. Like it's a long time. And I thought that like when you saw like the gang of friends that she was with as well, I was like, there's one of them. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we'll see. Um, then we get it cut to the Guardians. They're on the rocket ship. Obviously, they're all chatting. Adam Eve turns up and she's like, look, like I'm here to help. And like straight away, like, they're like, wait a second, like you'll be able to be taken over by the Sequid. And she's like, no, no, like creates obviously the suit around herself. They set off, and then Rex and Ray and Duplicate all stay behind in the facility. They're talking about like straight away it's a setup, right? When he's like, look, nothing's
Right.
gonna happen, everything will be totally fine. You always know in TV, like anyone that says that line, nothing's gonna be fine. Which we
You and I
see
have
then
watched
on.
enough horror movies to know that is. Yeah, I was like, oh God, are the three of them gonna die? Like immediately when he said that
Mhm.
line, I was like, oh, they're gonna
I
die.
know. It's like the scream, like I'll be back line, like like what that means. Shit is gonna get real.
Yeah.
And oh boy, Jesus, when we get to it again, wow. Obviously we cut back to the rocket ship, like Mark updates Eve on everything. I love their friendship. So straight away when he
Yeah.
sees her, he just grabs her and gives her like a big hug. I love that. And
She
then,
has the really good line of, "Man, my dad's a dick, but you win the shitty dad contest by far." That was a good line.
yes, absolutely. Yeah. Like she just gets it. And that's what I've always said, like, I love about their friendship is like where Mark can talk to Amber about basically everything, but not about being a superhero. And that's where Eve will always get him because she is
Yeah.
going through the same thing, basically, except a very different dynamic with her parents. Yeah. Then obviously Immortal says to them, look, shapeshift, he'll be like, sorry, Shape Smith, I keep doing that, will be the source of our info. He tells them all about like, we're going to attack the Martians on board. And then he says, look, like the ship will fire by the way, when you try and get close to this ship, it will like see us and it'll fire missiles at us. And then I love the way that like Bulletproof is like, you could have told us that earlier. Like, why are you telling us this now? And he's like, oh, well, like blah, 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 blah. And then that exact thing happens. And I love that line from Robot, which is Zachary Quinto, which is so on the nose. When like, I think it's Bulletproof says, like, what has the ship got? Like, is our rocket got
Yeah.
shields or something? He's like, this is not Star Trek. We don't have shields. Like, hello, Spock, like saying that line. Like that was obviously tongue in cheek, and I'm here for
Yeah.
it.
But also it like fit in context, right? Because it's like,
Yeah.
no, this is just a spaceship.
Yep. So then that obviously happens. The missiles come, blows up the rocket. Atom Eve straight away goes full on shield mode, gets them all like Miss Invisible kind of in a way, gets them all straight away, and like they're like, all right, everybody push and like take us towards the ship. Oh God. Then we cut back to Rex Duplicate and Ray, Shrinking Ray. So they're at their facility, they're ordering food, and then Cecil appears on the screen because something has happened where earlier on we saw that the Lizard League are back, the fucking Lizard League, which again are people that I completely forgot about. Completely forgot about these guys because they were always a joke. In season one, they
Yeah.
were a joke. They got like literally like flicked them away like they were so shit. And then now they're back and like they're badder than ever. But then Cecil anyway pops up on the screen as they're ordering food, which I love, like, giving their food
Yeah.
orders, and like straight away, like looks like shit is getting real. We then cut back, and we keep getting this where we cut backwards and forwards between this. And Ian and I were texting about this, where the stress just goes through the roof when we cut back between these
Yeah.
two moments. My God, so well done though. So then Eve and Cora in the bubble, they burst through the ship. Obviously, they vaporize through it. And then like the Martians are there. Like Smith tries to say to them, "Oh, hey, look, guys, blah 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 blah." And they're like, "Look, you caused all of this. You're the reason why we're in this trouble." And then one of the Sequids is crawling around, and Bulletproof goes, "Oh, there it is." And like they're like, "Wait!" Obviously, stamps on it. And then what do they say to him from doing that, Ian?
They say that it's like a hive mind, and now they'll know that they're all there, and they all fucking run, understandably.
This is, oh my God, when shit gets real. So this is when the tension turns from like 6 to 100, like immediately. So then we're going to keep cutting backwards and forwards here because this is what happens. We then go back to the Lizard League. So then they're chilling in this room and they're like, look, we've got all our fingers basically on the red buttons here. If they don't do what we say, like we can send a missile and bomb any single city in the country that we want. Shrinking Ray shrinks down, obviously. She then goes into the room. I love that she's like sitting on one of the shoulders and they don't even know she's there, listening to all of this. And then she quickly jumps on the button, opens up the door. And I love this when like Rex and all of Duplicate are just there behind them. And like once
Yeah.
he says that line or something like, oh, I need to kill you or something before my pizza gets cold. It's just such a Rex line. I love it.
Okay. So wait, I have one like thing of contention is
Okay.
the Lizard League. I don't understand how suddenly we saw the like that new leader take over,
Hmm.
right? But suddenly all of them are so powerful.
Yeah.
And so and I love the show, of course. This is just like a minor critique I have is that
Yeah.
like the whatever big guy, right? He felt
Mm,
too strong. Like
mm.
the way he was smushing Duplicate so easily, it was like, this guy seems like he's as strong as Invincible. Like, can we have not every superhero be able to rip people in half? Like, or every supervillain? Like, it just felt like for a random, like, goon in the Lizard League, which had previously been a full joke, I
Mm.
was like, this feels like he's too powerful. Like, and it was making me mad. So two, I was like, God, I'm being my mom. When we watched Buffy when it aired, my mom did not like Glory, and it was because she didn't like that Glory could beat up Buffy. Like she hated that Buffy couldn't beat her up, and that every time they encountered each other, she kicked Buffy's ass. And that's what I liked about Glory because she was a bigger threat. But
Mm.
sometimes I get mad because I'm like, but this show, everyone is like that. It feels like every new villain is that person. And it's like, but these people were a joke last season. Like, I don't understand how suddenly this
Mm.
one, like, random muscle lizard league guy can, like, eat them and break them in half and, like, smush people together. I don't know, but that like it just a little bit bothered me, but it also fucking stressed me out, right?
Mm.
Because I would have liked it more if it was like a lot of Lizard League people and that's how they like bested them, not just like this one guy besting them all. That's just like a minor whatever, but like my God, I was so stressed and we kept going back and forth and like Duplicate was one of the like people that's been around for a long time. I
Yeah.
can't remember is it Shrinking Ray? Is that her name?
Shrinking Ray.
The
Yeah, yeah,
She was one of the newer ones, wasn't she?
yeah. Hmm.
Like when they brought on more people.
Yeah.
So like, she felt I don't know if you felt this way, maybe I'm just like but she felt like a more competent one. Like she felt more like she knew what she was doing. So
Yeah.
I had more confidence in her, but I was like, oh, well, like she can handle this and then she cannot. Um,
Hmm.
but my God, when Duplicate, I was like, girl, just run. Like, get
Yep.
away from this guy. Like, yeah, make 1,000 duplicates, but like you, main one, run into the next room because it is not working with this guy. And then
Hmm.
when he smushes her together, it was so brutal. Like,
You know what? Like, this sounds insane. I love the brutality of the show. So, like, don't get me wrong. Like, I was gutted to see Duplicate go because obviously she's one of like the OG in a way. Like, not obviously the original Guardians, but you know what I'm saying.
but
Like, she's
yeah,
been there from season one, and then to lose her. This is what I meant earlier. It's like the show reminds you just when you get comfortable, we will kill any of these motherfuckers. So get ready.
yeah,
And like, when he smushes her and like grabs two of her together and smushes her into a ball and she drops on the floor, and like Rex is like, oh my God, like I thought this would just be an easy sit back and have pizza, and now people are dying around me. But as you
yeah,
say, like, yeah, like Shrinking Ray is the first one to take out one of the members, where like she goes inside of like her eye and then like basically blows up. Like, and then she comes out and she's like, right, okay, now I'm going to take on this big guy. And then, as you say, like, he eats her. And Rex straight away is like, oh, you don't know. Like, she can grow big and grows big. Doesn't matter. He still chomps down, swallows her, and says, tasty, and spits out a blood bubble. Like, Jesus Christ. Not only is he just murdered, like, one of the people, like, Duplicate, like, squished her together, but now he's eaten, like, Shrinking Ray. Like, this is brutal. But, it's in line with the show, right? Like, I remember like all of the super villains last time that like Mark fought, and there was the big guy that looked like Lion-O, and like he was like smacking Mark with a hammer like on his chest as well. Like all of that, it was brutal as fuck. And I love that the show leans back into this as well. Like just reminds you, don't ever get comfortable because shit will get
okay.
real.
Wait, I just put it together what my issue with that is because we often Cecil's telling us all the time that they need Mark, right? How important
Yeah.
Mark is. Mark left the planet, blah blah blah. But then it's like, but is he? Because if every villain is as strong as him or stronger, then like Mark doesn't seem that important. It feels like we need someone stronger and someone more powerful that would actually be important if all of these villains can be this strong. Um,
Mhm.
I guess I just need like maybe a few more heroes that we know are Invincible level. Like Adam Eve is kind of there with her powers, but like, you know, if it came down to it and it's a fist fight, she would get smushed by that guy too.
Mm.
And I guess I just need like even a mortal, like he's sometimes really strong, but then doesn't feel like that strong.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess like I keep going back to that, like you said, that like weird like lion whatever thing that like bit him and like beat him to shit. And it's like, okay, but like if Mark's losing all the time, is he that important? I don't know. So yeah, I guess like that's maybe my issue is I need like a, and you know, we love Buffy and Buffy did this too, where sometimes she was stronger, sometimes she was not. I
Mm.
need like a little bit more of like, because otherwise it's like, why are any of these heroes in the field? Because they're all going to get smushed and they're ripped in half.
Mm.
If none of them are like strong or, you know, I don't know. I know that's just a minor critique. I love the show, but I'm just like explaining the point. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from to a degree. I think as well, like we have to remember Mark's 19. He hasn't had his powers as long as other people, so it is still a
True.
massive learning curve for him. And I think Cecil always says that because he thinks of the potential of what Mark could be. So that's why it's probably good to keep Mark around because he knows that when Mark comes into his own, he will be incredibly handy. But that's why he wants to. That's why I said to Mark, he's like, "Look, I'll bring you back in the field, but you do everything that I tell you," because he knows like under his guise, he could have Mark to be really powerful.
Yeah.
But then that's not the person Mark is. Mark is the young teenager. Like he wants to spend time with his friends. He wants to spend time with his mother. He is not Nolan. Cecil
Yeah.
wanted to control Nolan and he never could. And then he sees, well, Mark might be my opportunity to do this, and he still can't. So I get where you're coming from completely. And Mark obviously has like saved a lot of people and like he's beaten the shit out of a lot of people, but he does get his ass handed to him quite often. But I love that we get these bigger characters and these overarching kind of threats, like these more powerful ones like Buffy and, Glory in Buffy, because, it is that, what are they going to do now? And normally 9 times out of 10, it's like Mark relying on the other people, right? You said like Adam Eve, and like he relies on, I mean, his father as well, he relied on as well in season
Yeah.
one. He starts to bring more people around him. It's not just a solo mission, which is what Cecil would want for Mark. But yeah, I get where you're coming from. I do love this fight as well, where Rex is literally getting his ass handed to him, where he's getting scratched to shit. Like
I
he's
was
getting
so
like
worried for him.
damn big, because I was like, are we doing this? Because Rex goes longer, and then obviously this happens. So I like Rex is throwing out all of his stuff. His name is Rex Explode. He makes things explode, obviously, throwing all the stuff. She's dodging it. But I do love that, like, again, this is the brutality of it, where Robert Kirkman loves characters losing hands, right? Rick from The Walking Dead, where he has one of the like things like this little circle thing in his
Whatever they
hand.
are, yeah.
Yeah, he's ready to throw it. She chomps down on his hand and then it explodes and he obviously loses his hand, but she loses her head. And like he's like holding his hand, but straight away, like Rex being Rex, he's like, I took you out, motherfuckers. Like, he's lost a hand, but he's still gloating. Then we get the leader who appears behind him and puts a gun to his head. Like, and
Adam, I was so stressed because I was like, no, 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 please don't do that. And I was like, again, because the show loves to kill everyone, I really was like, oh, we're gonna end with his head getting blown off, and I'm gonna be so upset.
yeah, and I'm so pleased that that has not happened. But yeah, and then just when all of that craziness is happening, you see his finger getting closer to the trigger, we then come back to the ship where Adam Eve has got her like barrier up. She's trying to hold all of like the sequids off, like so they're all trying to get to them. Ruddy has jumped out of robot suit. He's trying to quickly do that pulse thing that he did earlier. He's trying to get the suit redone again. Eve is like doing a lot of work here, like a lot. And then,
Yeah.
obviously she then is like, Mark's like, hold on, hold on. He's like, nearly done, nearly done. Fucking hell. She's like trying to hold all of this, blasts them all back temporarily. Eve then passes out in Mark's arms. Ruddy is not finished. And it's like, oh my God. And then just suddenly, like the guy, the astronaut, like obviously comes up, the leader of them all, and looks down on them. End. Jesus Christ. Like we've seen two characters die. All of our main heroes could be possibly taken over or killed at any second. All of this is going on. And then on top
So
of that, Ian,
stressful.
yeah, just when the credits start rolling, we then get to this scene, which I loved this ending. I love this. I love Alan the Alien. I absolutely love this character. I love the episode that we got when it was like exploring like Alan's past with his girlfriend and everything like that. The last time we saw Alan, he literally looked dead. Like the three Viltrumite
I was so upset
characters.
when he died, or he didn't, but I was so upset because I really thought he was dead.
Devastated, Ian. Devastated. Like Seth Rogen does such a good job with him as well. Like So
Yeah.
good. He is the right person to voice Alan the alien. But I love, when we see him and like straight away, I was like, are we at his funeral? Like, what are we doing? And then when he's like, oh, I'm alive, I'm awake, I'm in this machine, like he's whatever, and obviously breaks out of it, and he's like, oh, like I'm a lot bigger, I'm stronger now, I've come back bigger. Like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Then who walks in the room, Ian?
Um, the Optimus Prime guy with the white beard, who is, I was a little silly when he was like, "That's not me," and he just looks the same. He just has a mustache
Will
instead of
this
a
be enough?
beard.
Yeah. So if you remember, in the first part of the season, Thaddeus is his name, and he was the leader of the coalition of the planets. So again, it is Optimus Prime voice. Literally, hasn't even tried to change his voice. It is literally Optimus Prime. And then he reveals, yeah, as you said, Ian, I am actually a Viltrumite. Dun dun dun. And like, I actually love this way. Even I was like, oh. And he's like, look, like I'm the only one who ever went against the Viltrumite Empire, the only one. And he says, look, Alan, I remember you told me about this character called Mark. The reason why, like, I let this happen to you is because I knew that we'd be able to bring you back bigger and stronger, like the Bionic Woman, whatever. He brings him back, sorry, bigger, stronger, like from that machine. He's like, look, last time the Viltrumites, they kicked your ass. Now you will be able to stand much more of a chance because you're a lot more powerful. And when you get Mark on side, then we've got a mini army going on here. Bring Mark here. I need to see him. We need to have this discussion. Then we get the end. Jesus, Ian.
When he pulled off that when he said he was a Viltrumite, I was like, please don't kill Alan again. Like I really was
Mm-hmm.
worried he was gonna be like, I'm a Viltrumite
Same.
and fuck you, I'm gonna kill you. I was like, oh.
Mm.
I told you I like was teared up through the end because I was so stressed and I like genuinely was like so happy to see Alan because that was such an
Mm.
upsetting episode and like to end with such like a pathetic death, like I don't know, it's like he got beat up, he's like his eyes popped out and then he's like maybe he'll survive. Nah, we're gonna like kill him in a hospital bed. I was like, no, my
Mm-hmm.
sweet angel, but now he's back so good, please don't kill him
Yep.
again.
And you know what? Like, it wouldn't have been outside of the show to do that. Like if they did
Yeah,
just murder him, you would have been like, okay, this is hell. But like we've seen this before, right? Like we've just had two major characters die. Alan as
yeah.
well. We saw him die before. We're going to kill him again. But I love like all of this, the building up, all this tension, like all this stress. Characters are dying. Rex has lost a hand. Like all of our characters are potentially about to die. Then we return to our comic relief, our lovely, wonderful Alan the alien. It just brings us back. It resets us, and I love it.
You really
Um,
are right. It's Seth Rogen's voice is perfect for it because he's like he comes off as such like a lovable guy, like that
yeah.
like nice guy that's just like kind of goofy and but instead he's like that guy as an alien and that really works.
It really does. Like going back to season one as well. Like, remember the first time he fought Mark, and then he was like, like, oh, your name's Invincible. You're really not invincible. Like I kicked your ass. And then they had that really cool conversation when they were sitting on the moon, and he was explaining like everything about him. Just he's always great. I love Alan the
Yeah.
Alien. I absolutely adore this character, and I love that we're going to get more of him in these next episodes as well. Clearly. But yeah, like overall thoughts on this episode, Ian, just wrapping up. Obviously, we've said the word stress many times, but what's your overall thoughts? Like we had a lot of time off before we came back, and we've come back with this bombastic episode. What's your overall thoughts wrapping up?
I mean, my problem with any show that like does this is I forget everything. So there were so many things that I had forgotten. Um and I was tricked into thinking like, oh, this is more of a low key episode. That's all right.
Mhm.
Nothing, nothing wrong with a low key, not super action packed episode. But then they fucking kick me in the balls over the last like 10 minutes.
Very much that. You know what, like I loved it because I remember like when we went through the aftermath in episode one of season two, like when we just sat with like, all of the grief and the trauma of like what Mark had been through, what Debbie went through. And it looked like we were starting to do that, right? When like Mark was
Yeah.
like completely covered in blood and like the pace was a lot slower, where we hung around with just Mark. We were just with Mark, seeing what's going on. But the pace builds up so well. And I think it ramps up incredibly considering there's still a lot of story that they obviously clearly want to tell, but just building up to the stakes here. We're building up to the last part of the season. Something big is going to happen at the end of this season. And if this is where we're starting, can you imagine what the season finale? We're going to go into
Oh.
cardiac arrest, Ian, when we watch that last episode, literally. But you know what? I loved all of this. I love like we see so many characters again. Like we see like the journeys that they've been on. And I think one of the big things that has affected season two for me is just the time that we've waited. And even like Robert
Mm.
Kirkman and Stephen Yeun have both said, look, when we go into season three, like we're already in development of season three, they're already doing it right now. the time between seasons will not be as long because we nearly
Oh,
waited
good.
2 years between season 1 and season 2, and then we've just had this huge gap. Which, of course, don't get me wrong, like writer's strike and everything,
Right. Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
relevant. Of course it is, but I think like with that big gap between seasons, obviously the little gap here, it's affected us in terms of like there's still so much that they need to tell. Like, do you remember
Yeah.
Angstrom Levy, the guy who was creating the multiverses in episode 1? Where the hell is
I
he? What is he
couldn't have
doing?
told you his name, but I was like, wait, is the astronaut the guy with the multi? And then I was like, oh no, no, that's a different character.
Right? And like at the end when like his head blew up to like this massive like brain head and he was like, oh, I'm gonna get Mark. And then where's he? What's he doing? General Krieg at the end of episode 4. Do you remember him? He's the one that said to Mark, he was the in charge of the Viltrumites, and he said to Mark, look, we're going to enlist you in the army. If Earth tries to oppose us or go against us, we will wipe out all of humanity. You make sure that you get all the humans on side so that when we come down to dominate, they will be complicit. Do you remember that? He's the one that
Yeah.
gave Mark that ultimatum. Where's he right now? Obviously, he's with Nolan doing whatever, ready for Nolan's death, like to kill him. But still, when's he going to come back? 'Cause he warned Mark. He said, I will be back. And then we get the Mauler twins, where at the end as well, like they were duplicating more of themselves as well. So, like, what are they doing right now? So we've still got all of this building up as well. That's going to come back in the season. And like, how many episodes are we talking? Like another 3, I think it is.
Right. Yeah. I don't think that
Before the
many.
end. And it's like, I absolutely love Invincible. Like I do. And I love that, where we started in season 1, we are building out, but it still feels like there's space for every single character. And I think this episode's a really
Yeah.
good example for that, where like there's space for Debbie, there's space for Mark, there's space for William, there's space for Amber. We find out what's happening with Caesar, like the Guardians, like there's still so much space and it's just paced really, really well. And even though things ramped up in this episode where like to the point you were like, Jesus, what the hell is an asteroid going to come down and kill everybody? Like I wouldn't be surprised, like where we're at right now. But it's still paced incredibly well and leading us through this season really well, despite the time that we've had to wait.
Yeah. No, I agree. And, you know, a thing that people are complaining about with Marvel, which I'm always like, that's a stupid complaint, is like when there's too many characters, because that's how comic books are, right?
Yeah.
I think comic books work better when there is, even if it's like, it's the comic is named after Mark, right? And the same thing with Spider-Man, right? We still have like Mary Jane and Aunt May. We still need these other characters to build the world. I
Mm-hmm.
get really bored because there are some where it's like just the one character and that's it. And I get bored with that. Like I don't know. I'm a really hard sell on like if it's a lone character with not really a like backup cast. I'm like a really hard sell on that. That gets boring to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this show does a really good job, which The Magicians does as well. Adam, nudge, nudge to watch that show. Does a really good job of balancing all the characters where like, yeah, sometimes we might not check in with, we only got William for a little bit, but we still checked in to be like, hey, this character is still here.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that, like, I trust the storytelling enough to know that, like, okay, like maybe William's not a big part of this story, but like we're still like getting him. He's still there, and like he might get an episode or whatever, or might get a storyline. And I don't know. I like having this whole world,
Mm-hmm.
and I like that we've expanded the world enough in season 2 that like we have extended periods without Mark, and we have Rex, who now we do care about, and we're like, oh shit, he's going on this mission, and the other 2 people he's with are fucking dead. Like, and I think that's like a really good indicator of good storytelling, right? That like we can go away from our main character for a while and still be like very into it, very engaged, and care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100% agree. Like the other characters, they build the world around this character. Like we talk about the world building, it is through these other characters, right?
Yeah.
And I love that. It's the type of thing as well. Like, and you kind of get this in, when you watch any really good TV show that does this, like Buffy is the prime example, where even these characters, when they're not on screen, you can already imagine, all right, so this character would
Yeah.
be doing this right now. This character would be having this conversation. They'd be hanging out with this character. And that's because the world has been built so well around
Yes.
Mark, where, like, when he goes to see a certain character, right? All right, he's going to see this is the dynamic of their relationship. I totally get the conversation, the type that they're going to have. Things are great between them, things are not great between them, but I know how they're going to speak to each other. I know
Yeah.
how they're going to react with each other, which is why I really loved when we went back to see Amber. And like straight away, she was just like, look, I totally get it. Like, I've had some shit going on as well. It hasn't been good, but I know what I signed on for. I completely understand. And I'm just so pleased that you're back. Love
Yeah.
that. Absolutely love that. And that was one isolated scene in an episode where shit got very real very fast. Juxtapose that to the end when so much happens. We lose 2 characters. Everything's just like bam, 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 bam. And yet, although it's stress, it like doesn't feel like it's overloading us. It's just ramping up the world that we already know and ramping up the stakes that we already know have been
Yeah.
established previously as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ian, so this episode, obviously we give them all out at a ranking out of 10. What would you give this episode coming back?
8. I think
Cool.
8.5 maybe.
8.5. I have 9 out of 10 written down. Just because this episode didn't have, for me, it didn't have to go so hard. Like, it didn't have to, but the fact that it did, I love it. So, like, and even right back from the very first episode of this season, like how slowly like things have built up. And like season
Yeah.
4 as well ended with a big cliffhanger. Like Nolan gets his back broke, taken away, Mark's beaten to shit. This general's telling him, I will be back, has wiped out a planet. And yet, you know, it could have been just, as you said, Ian, it like tricks us. It's like a chill episode to start with where
Yeah.
we're slowly building, and suddenly it gets turned up to 100 at the end. And I just love that the show does that. It reminds us, don't get comfortable because shit will get real at any
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another great, solid episode. But yes, everyone, this is our return to Invincible. I am so pleased it's back. And as I kind of mentioned earlier on there to you, Ian, like I'm so pleased that they've already started development on season 3, so that we haven't got as long to wait between seasons, because it was
Yeah.
literally nearly 2 years we waited between season. This show started in 2021, to put it into
Oh.
perspective. Like, when was that? So, like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like wild, but I'm so excited for this. I'm really excited to see how they're going to like wrap up this season as well, because as we said, like Angstrom, General Krieg, the Mulder twins, we've got this new Viltrumite now. Like, you know, all of this is going on. Like, Rex, like, what's going to happen with him? What, like, there's so much happening, and I'm really intrigued. Will we see Omniman again? Who knows? Like, that's the big question as well. But yeah, just to wrap up, Ian, please tell everybody where they can find you on social media and check out your stuff.
You can find me at Ian X Carlos on all social media platforms. You can find my podcast, SlayerFest98, at SlayerFestX98 on all social media platforms, as well as YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. And My Bloody Judy is the same, but at My Bloody Judy on all social media platforms.
There you go. You got that rehearsed, got it down.
Yeah.
But I mean, you've said it that many times, right? But yeah, so there you go. Make sure you go and check out Ian's stuff as well. I think you're covering The Magicians now. Did you say, Ian, on
Yeah.
Slayerfest? There you go. Yep. So obviously Ian's been nagging me like my nana to go and watch it. So I will get on. I will watch it and listen, because it sounds like my cup of tea. So I will get on that. But yes, if you do want to check out the podcast, obviously you're listening to it now, and well, you might be watching it, but all the podcast episodes are also available on YouTube, so you can watch them as well, which is just Last Week on Pod. If you type that in, you will find us. We are available, obviously, on all streaming platforms as well. Type in Last Week on Podcast, you will find us on there. If you want to follow the show, it's available on all social media as well. Last Week on Pod, type that in on X/Twitter, whatever you want to call that hell site, or Instagram. You will find us on there. And if you want to follow me personally, I am at Straughan87 on everything. So come and say hello to me on there. But yeah, I want to say a big thanks again, Ian, for coming back and doing this. It's been super fun. Of course, I'm super pleased this season's back. And yeah, you're looking forward to the rest?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, well, and I'm sure we'll have you back on, Ian, to talk about more Invincible. Yeah, it's fun. All right. Well, until next time, everyone, take care.
Bye.